the aims of my writing course are to try to focus on writing as a form of standalone communication so that my students can address the rhetorical situation, practice writing so that they can communicate without verbal explanation, which is of course different than most students generally think of communication. And also to make sure that we highlight analysis and critical thinking as modes of inquiry in the classroom and activities that you can engage in through the process of writing, so that there's an element of preparation for the rest of college, despite the fact that, of course, our intro to composition students don't necessarily fit a familiar profile or come from any one type of background or major when they enter our course. The composition experiences that have influenced my teaching probably start with my dad, and having spent time at home as a young student not being able to type and having him type papers for me, and he would be very presumptuous and edit during the entire process, and this always really annoyed me because I felt like I didn't have any control over what I had to say. So in self-defense, I learned how to type and started to actually do my own homework and write my own papers. So I encourage that in my students. I had a fantastic freshman composition instructor, Dr. Deborah Bergauer, who sort of arranged our freshman composition class around the rhetorical situation and thinking very much about the differences and the overlaps between the reader and the writer in the rhetorical process. And one of my most interesting composition experiences probably comes from a literature course. I had a paper that didn't get a grade that I thought was appropriate. I was a little upset because I got a B, and I felt compelled to go in and speak to my professor about it. And one of the things that I realized in the course of discussing the paper with her was that I had a very clear understanding of what the paper said, and she had a very different kind of understanding of what the paper said. And as soon as I went in to speak with her about the purpose of the paper, we realized that most of the groundwork for what I was trying to say was in the paper, but there was a distinct difference between what I was trying to say and what my paper was actually saying, which I think is something that I use in my teaching because I understand that this is a sort of a different space that students aren't necessarily savvy about navigating yet, the difference between what you think you're saying and what you're actually saying in your writing when you think of composition as a standalone writing communication experience. And then really when I got to graduate school, Dr. Julie Jung was fairly instrumental in helping me to realize the importance of revision, that there was always a method of going back and looking at your paper and really questioning your writing, both as a writer who's trying to communicate something and as a reader who's trying to get something out of the paper, and looking at the question of rhetorically listening to what it is that you're writing and thinking about those, again, overlaps between the writer and the reader during the process of composition. If I were to offer my students any advice, I would probably suggest that they take the time to become invested in whatever assignment they're actually working on at the moment. If they can somehow find a piece of themselves to invest in the process, whatever the assignment is, I really think they'll be significantly more interested in the process of writing, in turning out a product that's really meaningful to them, and in terms of internalizing the experience, I think they'll have a much better just experience as a whole as they write if they have some sort of understanding of what it is they want to accomplish and are personally invested in the process.